Hello, YouTube. It's been a while. Actually, it hasn't been that long. I think the last time we did one of these videos, it had been a while. This one's coming not right hot on the heels of the last one, but not too far away. So, but I have completed 5 more things, read, watched, whatever. And if you'll see, a while back, I started what was going to be a series of all my old sports jerseys from all my old teams I played for back in the day. And then I got interrupted by like Christmas, and I wanted to wear a Christmas shirt and some other stuff, but we're back to the sports shirts. So the first one I did was my softball team. When we first started, we were sponsored by a bar called Cubbies, and so there was the Cubbies logo on our shirt. Eventually we changed to the Grizzlies, and for baseball I wore number 17 on the back. Yeah, so this was the second incarnation of our softball team, and this was the last jersey I wore before I stopped playing, when we had our son back in the day, and things got busy. Life got busy. It does that, kids. It does that. Be prepared. It can be good. It can suck. It can be in between, but it gets busy. Anyways, let's get on to the 5 things I have completed. First up, a book called Robotech, Battlecry. This is actually a collection of 3 stories that were originally written back, I think, in the 80s. I don't know if it was written during the run of the Robotech cartoon or shortly afterwards, but they are from back in that era. And they kind of summarize the events of the cartoon, but also add in some extra stuff. So, the different stories are called Genesis, Battlecry, and Homecoming. So basically, if you don't know what Robotech is, it was a cartoon from 1984-ish, 85, I think. And Transformers and G.I. Joe in the mid-80s were my 2 big dogs. Nobody could dethrone them. But there were a number of other cartoons. The 80s was ripe with cartoons, good ones. And there were some that were right close on the heels of these 2, but nobody could dethrone those 2. One of the ones right behind was Robotech for me. Also Mask. And after that, many others. But Robotech was near the top. Basically, the story of Robotech is on a small South Pacific island called Macross, I think it is. An alien ship, I can't remember what year this is, but an alien ship crash lands on this island, and humanity, who's in the middle of their own kind of what's going to be another world war, everybody's hating on each other. This event kind of brings the whole world together, like, oh, what is this alien ship? What does it mean? What's in it? You know, can we utilize this thing? And turns out, yes, they can utilize it. So this alien ship is full of this power source called protoculture, and it's capable of great feats of engineering and transformation. So the humans, they all come together, they form a committee and a team to explore this wreck, take what they can from it, and what ends up happening is they end up adapting what is called robotechnology, hence the cartoon's name of Robotech, to develop a fleet of these Veritech fighters. If you remember, I did a toy unboxing of a Veritech fighter from Robotech a number of months ago. So it's basically, it looked much like Starscream and the Seeker jets from Transformers back in the day, like one of those classic 80s fighter jet molds. But they could transform into either a full robot or halfway, where the plane top is still intact, but the legs and the arms hang down, sort of thing, which was called Guardian mode, I think. And the pilot's inside the whole time and controls the Veritech fighter regardless of its formation, sort of thing. So they adapt all this technology to form a new defense force, blah, blah, blah. And on the day they finally managed to repair this ship and are going to take it into the sky, the alien race that's looking for the ship finally arrives, and a big brouhaha kicks off, and the SDF-1, which is what they dubbed this ship that crash landed that they repair, takes off into space, and the Zentradi is the alien race, and they're huge. They stand 50, 60, 70, 80 feet tall. They're way bigger than humans. Takes off after the SDF-1. So, and then the series from that point the SDF one travels the universe, always having these skirmishes with the Zentradi, and meanwhile, life inside the SDF one, the ship is so big that they're able to recreate Macross City inside of the ship, and people try to have a normal life living in the ship. Well, we follow, the main action we follow is from a lot of the Veritech fighters. The main character is Rick Hunter, and a number of other Veritech pilots, as well as the girlfriends and stuff of these pilots and stuff like that. And it just follows their adventures as they try and run and defend themselves against the Zentradi, and eventually they try to come back to Earth to report on what's gone on. But Earth is like, we don't want you back, you're just bringing the aliens back. Well, what if they decide to use you guys as hostages, and then you're fucked, right? Sort of thing. So it follows the series kind of up until the SDF one returns back to Earth, and are basically told to fuck off. But the series goes on for way longer than that. But these first 3 stories in this book only follow up to that point. There's apparently 2 more volumes of these short stories in about to be released. I think the second one might have just recently been released sometime in February, and then there's a third one. So what I liked about the book is that, you know, it had all those major events that happened in the cartoon, but there's so much behind the scenes stuff. You know, they develop the characters a little bit more, and you see some events that don't happen. My favorite part of the book that you don't see in the cartoon, or at least I don't remember it being seen in the cartoon, is not long after the ship first crash lands on Macross, you see the first expedition of people that go inside the ship to find out what's in there, and explore and see what's going on, and how they are kind of violently turned away from doing that. So it's kind of a cool little, almost a prequel in a way, to see what happened with that ship when it first crash landed, because I think the series picks up just as they're about to launch the ship, after years and years, I think a decade of the ship being worked on and explored and studied and that sort of thing. So very cool book. I don't think anybody could read that book though and understand what the hell was going on if they didn't know the Robotech cartoon. You know, it's kind of meant for people that already know the basic story and can understand what's going on. At least that's what I remember. I don't think it would be very good at describing exactly how everything's happening. It's like you have to know what's going on, if that makes sense. Next up, a while back, a couple months ago, maybe more, I discovered a website, an app called Thrift Books. Now, I'll put a link to it in the body of this video, but it basically, it's somewhere in the States, and they have, I can't remember how much, when you go in the search bar, I think it says search over 19 million titles. So they basically have, they do sell new books that are new releases and stuff like that, but mostly I think what it's used for is they have old books. And I think these books can be basically got from anywhere. Like a lot of the ones I have gotten are old library books and that sort of thing. So they just get all these old books and then sell them. And when you purchase something, like if I purchase half a dozen books in an order, you only pay one rate for whatever the shipping is for those 6 books. You just pay it. But I think they must have all different types of depots around the States, because 2 of the books will be coming from over here in the States, and 2 more will be coming from over here. But they don't charge you extra because they're coming from different places. They'll be shipped separately and arrive at different times, but you don't pay any extra for them coming from various different locations. And the prices are pretty good. Some of the more rare ones are the ones that are in really good condition still. Might be a little more pricey, but I'm buying books anywhere from $3 US per book up to kind of the most I've spent on an average purchase would be like $7 US. So, and the books I've been focusing on, there's probably 3 or 4 different lines of books that I've been focusing on. 2 or 3 of those lines I didn't know existed until I was just doing a random search on something one day, and they came up, and I was like, what? These exist? How do I find them? And that's how I found Thrift Books. But the one series that I'm really going to town on is a series I read probably back in the late 80s, early 90s, when I was kind of in the 10 years old to 14 years old range. And I really love these books. I only had, or I still have them, but I think I have like 3 originally that I bought in the bookstores and really enjoyed them. But there was just always so many books and other stuff I wanted to get that I wasn't able to flesh out that series as much as I wanted. But now, with the discovery of thrift books and how much cheaper they are to buying them used, I have since purchased a fair many. Let's just say a fair many. The first one I just finished recently is called The Night Parade. And this is, all these books come from the Forgotten Realms series. So it's all like dragons and elves and sorcerers. Like, it's that sort of thing, right? That kind of Lord of the Rings-ish type environment and that sort of thing. So, which I really liked as a kid, like a Dungeons and Dragons. I think they're actually related to Dungeons and Dragons, but this is the first one I read. If you see here, it's from the Harper's series. They have all these sub-series and they do trilogies and stuff. So I really had to pay attention to that once I figured it out and make sure I had all the books in a series before I was like, oh, I have book 3 of 3, but not the first 2, right? So I really had to pay attention to that eventually, and I'm starting to flesh out some of the trilogies I've accidentally purchased into without really realizing it. So this book is called The Night Parade, and it's from the Harper's series, but the Harper's books they're not part of like a here to here to here series. They're related, but you don't have to read one to know what's going on in the other, sort of thing. So the story of this book is that there's this powerful and sexy ruler of a place called Arabelle, and her name is Mirmeen Lal. Now, 14 years ago, there was the night of the Great Storm, where it just thunder, lightning, crash, boom. It was violent, and that was the night she gave birth to her daughter. However, her husband at the time, Dak, said the baby was lost. She never questioned it because she was all tired from giving birth and all that shit, and was just sad that they had lost the baby. Now, all these years later, one day, Dak, who she doesn't like anymore, and they went their separate ways, returned to her palace and got an audience before her, I think by beating somebody up in a bar. And he said, Mirmeen, I lied to you back in the day. Our daughter didn't die like I led you to believe. I sold her. And he said, I sold her to the Night Parade. Now, the Night Parade is, to people, a fable. It's not really a confirmed thing. The Night Parade is a band of creepy, ghoulish freaks of nature, monsters that come and steal newborn babies and turn them into their more of the Night Parade, more monsters, sort of thing. And but it's always been a fable. It's a story used to scare kids and entertain, right? So, but Dak is insistent that the Night Parade is real, and that's where their daughter is. Mirmeen ends up killing him out of rage and frustration and just plain annoyance, and but starts thinking about what he said and some of the information he gave her on how he could possibly track how she could possibly track their daughter down. So she ends up wanting to follow through on this and enlists the aid of the Harpers. Now the Harpers, and she is a member of the Harpers, but has since, she's busy ruling her kingdom and that sort of thing. So she enlists the aid of some of the Harpers, some of her friends from past years. There's a young kid named Ord. There's a former love interest named Rees, I don't know quite how to say his name. And then there's a couple named Verena, and his name starts with a B, can't remember. And then they have a sorcerer named Kardok. So this little group follows the clues that Dak gave Mirmeen, and they get a bit of progress, but every time they start getting a lead, the person they're kind of questioning is killed by some outside force. So they know they're onto something. They know somebody else is kind of following along with them, but they don't know exactly what's going on. So eventually they do come face to face with a few members of the Night Parade, and they go, oh shit, yeah, the Night Parade is real. And they somehow end up escaping. So from that point onwards, it's them trying to track down Mirmeen's daughter against the odds stacked against them by the Night Parade, which are very high. And they end up finding this young girl named Kristen, who looks a lot like Mirmeen, has the same kind of mannerisms and that sort of thing. So they're convinced they found her daughter. As time goes by, the Night Parade's leader, Lord Six, and all of his minions, they kind of manipulate events, and eventually all the truth is unraveled as so many of the Harpers have perished. There's only a couple left, Mirmeen, Kristen, and I think Ord is still alive. Rice is still alive, but at least 3 or 4 of the Harpers that went on this mission have died throughout all the action. And the festival the Night Parade has, where they steal children on the night of a storm, is closing in on the town of Calimport, which is where Mirmeen was originally raised and where her daughter was stolen originally. So it's going to be another night of debauchery by the Night Parade monsters. People will be murdered, babies will be stolen, so it's up to Mirmeen, Kristen, Ord, and Rise to somehow rise above all those odds and stop the Night Parade in their tracks. Can they do it? You'll have to read it to find out, but good luck finding that book. Go to thrift books, right? Next up, a couple movies. Finally got around to watching this. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. This is a 2023 movie, and one of the brain children that came to create it and write it was Seth Rogen, Canadian, and a funny man. So I thought that was kind of cool. Now, this is an animated movie, and it's kind of in the same style as like the Spider-Man movies, like Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse. A little bit different, but same kind of general vibe going on. And it was really good. I was really impressed with this movie. For one thing, they kept it to just a little bit over an hour and a half. Fucking perfect. I remember in the 80s, like literally movies were an hour and a half long for the most part. There was the odd long one, like Star Wars at just over 2 hours would have been a super long one for back in that day, right? But especially comedies and just action adventure movies, hour and a half. And you know what? Hour and a half is all you fucking need. I tried to watch some movies this weekend, and I'm like looking at the runtime on them all, and it's all like 2.5 hours, 2.5 hours, 2.5 hours. I'm like, for fuck's sake. Like, you don't need, I find in these longer movies, there's just so much like of these slow scenes where it's like, did they really need to put that in there? That like, that's kind of losing interest because of some of this stuff. Can't they just condense it and take out all the fluff and just give me the story quick and easy? But doesn't seem to be a thing anymore. Movies have to at least be 2 hours long at this point anymore, if not way more. So I found the shorter runtime of this movie very appealing and refreshing. Also, the soundtrack I found was pretty awesome. It was pretty good. I can't even remember what the songs were, but I just remember while I was watching it, I was like, fuck, this fucking what? Yeah. You know, it was good. It was solid. And the story was awesome. A lot of the same elements as usual from a Turtles perspective, but basically it starts in the past, just explaining TCRI, the company that produces the mutagen that always transforms the Turtles, who is led by Cynthia Utrom. Yeah. They have a guy working for them named Baxter Stockman. We all know Baxter Stockman, the nerdy scientist. And they end up having a falling out with him. So they kind of basically are tracking him down. He ends up getting killed in an explosion while the TCRI goons raid his apartment or his hideout or whatever it is. And in the end, a jar of mutagen gets dropped into the sewers, covers a bunch of little baby turtles, and then a rat, of course, finds them, and they all mutate. And we have the birth of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and their master Splinter. Now, Splinter, originally, when the Turtles are young, tries to go out on an adventure with them topside in the world, and has a very bad experience. And from that point onwards, he does not trust humanity. He does not want the Turtles interacting with them. They're only to go out at night and raid whatever, to get supplies that they need to live in the sewers. Now, one night when they're out, they come across a young girl named April O'Neil, who is investigating TCRI because she aspires to be a journalist, and she's kind of a laughingstock because when she did do her last report, I think it was at her school for announcements or something. She ended up puking on camera. So she wants to shed this reputation she's got and do something serious. And so the turtles end up wanting to help her, and they explain how they came to be and everything. And she's like, wow, cool. And eventually they find out that a mutant named oh shit, I forget his name now. Oh, Superfly Superfly has all this band of other mutants, and the turtles kind of gain acceptance with them, and they're like, oh, cool, people like us and whatever. But then eventually they find out that Superfly is trying to eventually he wants to mutate all the animals in the world to create a whole bunch of mutants and basically take over the world and show the humans what for. So the turtles are like, whoa, you can't do that, you can't do that. So then a big brouhaha eventually erupts, and basically it's the turtles fight against Superfly as they try to prevent him from taking those measures. And eventually the turtles get captured, and they have some of their life essence being drained from them, but Splinter and April show up and save them. And then eventually the turtles are able to turn all of Superfly's mutant goons against him. The turtles are able to convince them, like, this is wrong, like, we should be able to live with the humans and whatever. And eventually the turtles do good on their promise with the help from all these other mutants, and April does a report making the turtles and all the other mutants look like heroes. So they do become accepted by mainstream society, and the turtles even enroll at April's high school and end up going there and being very, very popular. And at the end we see Cynthia Utrom from TCRI maybe about to get a little help from somebody known as Shredder. Was that a good Krang or what? Shredder. Shredder, you fool. Krang is the shit. So hopefully Krang will come into it too at some point, because, you know, if they're introducing the Shredder at the end of this movie, they're going to do a second one, and it's probably going to be just as awesome. So can't wait for that. The other movie I watched, this is a beauty. This is an absolute beauty. Vamp. This is a movie from back in the 80s when I was a kid, and I had taped it on VHS off of cable and watched it relentlessly. I love this movie. It's a 1980s vampire movie, kind of like Fright Night or The Lost Boys or whatever, right? And the story of it is there's these two university age guys, Keith and AJ, and they're trying to get into this fraternity. The fraternity is doing all these goofy things for initiation, and they're like, what is this bullshit? Like, this is so stupid. It's not even scary. It's not even cool. Like, can we do something serious to get into this fraternity? Like, give us a challenge. Give us something fun to do. And so they're like, okay, we're going to throw a party, and you know what you're going to bring? A stripper. So they're like, no problem. So Keith and AJ need to get into the big city to go find a stripper, but they have no car. So there's a nerdy fellow student that they know of named Duncan, and they know he has a car. So they approach him with a favor, can we borrow your car and stuff? And Duncan's like, he's hurting for friends. He can't find any friends. As hard as he tries, as much money and whatever he throws at him, he just can't buy friends. And so he's like, you can have the car to take into town, but you got to take me with you and be my friends for the night, sort of thing. And they're like, oh, for fuck's sake. Okay, I guess so, right? So they go into the city and search around for a bit, and finally, after a bit of a run-in at a diner with this weird albino-looking dude and his weird gang, they get into a bit of a tussle there, but they escape and go on their merry way, and eventually find a strip club that's in this really seedy area. So they go in, and they're sitting there and watching the show while AJ is trying to, or no, is it AJ or Keith? I know AJ, I kind of forget which one is which. But anyways, all three of them are mesmerized by this stripper named Katrina that comes out near the end of the night. No, it wasn't near the end of the night because the night kept going. Well, whatever. She comes out, and she's the one that you see on the front here, played by Grace Jones. She's got this weird red wig on with the white face paint and whatever, and she does this really weird kind of routine that has everybody kind of, and so it's silence and stuff when she finishes until everybody's like, great, fucking yeah. And So everybody's mesmerized by her. So AJ goes backstage to try and find her and be like, "You're the one we want. Can you come strip for my idiot fraternity people friends?" And so they end up kind of making out on her bed and whatever. And but eventually, as she kind of gets a little intense and she's biting his chest and stuff, and then all of a sudden, vampire face, right? And she fucking sinks her teeth into his neck, and that's it for AJ. So Keith, meanwhile, Duncan's partying it up. He doesn't care. He's drinking, he's watching strippers, he's fine. But Keith is like, God, where's AJ? Like, what the fuck? So then there was this waitress named Amaretto who is like, oh, hey, Keith, don't you remember me? And he's like, who is this bitch, right? But she ends up helping him try to track down AJ, but the owner of the strip club is talking to the stripper and being like, you killed another one? Like, come on, we can't be doing this. So from that point onwards, it's kind of Keith and Amaretto, whose real name is Allison, as well as Duncan. Duncan is actually at the strip club all night long while Keith and Amaretto try and figure out what's going on. It's just kind of this adventure sequence afterwards where they end up finding out there's vampires. They're running from the vampires in the sewers trying to hide. They run into the albino gang again and have to run from them until eventually all things come to a head. And of course, in the end, the stripper played by Grace Jones takes Allison captive, and Keith has to kind of find a way to finish her off and save the woman, sort of thing, right? And there's a funny bit at the end, but I'm not going to tell you because I really think if you like 1980s movies, especially 1980s vampire movies, you're going to fucking love this thing. I knew that I loved this movie, and it was another one of those searches, like with the Thrift Books app. Like, I was just doing a search on something else, and for some reason Vamp popped up, and I was like, holy shit, I hadn't thought of it in years. I hadn't seen it since I was probably 10, 11, 12 years old, you know? And I was like, holy shit, I'm purchasing this. And I got it, and it took me a while to get around to watching it. And as I was watching it, I didn't really remember the specific details of this movie. I just remember loving it and that it was an awesome vampire movie. And it was amazing. I loved every minute of it. And that's just such a cool genre. The 80s vampire movies were done so well. The effects were so neat. The vampires look fucking freakish. And yeah, I want to find more of them because I have so much fun with them. Vamp, Fright Night, and The Lost Boys. Easily my top 3 80s vampire movies. If you love that kind of shit and you haven't seen any of those, go watch the ones you haven't watched and then rewatch the ones you have because they are awesome. Now, last up, a cartoon series on DVD that I found. I don't even remember where I found it. Anyways, from 1988, The Garbage Pail Kids. Now, like I said, 1988, 13 episodes it ran for, not very long, and apparently it didn't air in the US because they thought it was too gross and I guess they thought it would rot the minds of us kids at the time. But it's not that bad. Like, I don't know why it was so reviled at the time, but it follows 5 kids. What are their names? Yeah, Split Kit, Elliot Mess, Clogged Dwayne, Patty Putty, and Terry Cloth. So it follows these 5 kids on the adventures they have. And it's kind of weird because they have kind of normal appearances, but then they morph into their Garbage Pail Kid appearances when they're all kind of weird and freakish. And they go on these adventures, but a lot of them are based on like movies and stuff like that. So each episode will start with a kid in a garbage can at the front of a movie theater, kind of popping the lid up and looking out and kind of waving his hands, and the marquee on the movie theater, it'll be a movie title, but then the letters will rearrange to kind of spell out the nature of that episode. And there's a lot of different movie franchises and stuff represented in this series, on the adventures that they go on. Like, I think there was Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. There's an Indiana Jones one. There's The Fly. I think there might be a Superman one. So they kind of do these parodies of these different franchises, but put like a Garbage Pail Kids spin on it. Now, if you don't know the Garbage Pail Kids, they were a big thing in the 80s. I love the Garbage Pail Kids. It started with a Topps did a trading card line, and which they were also stickers that you could peel off the card, but I never peeled mine off. I kept them as cards, of these really cool cartoon drawings of these kids that were like gross and freakish, right? So there was like Bony Joni, and it was like basically a girl that's like a skeleton sort of thing, right? And then there was Rob Slob. He's just like a big fat, he's got boogers hanging off him, and he looks like a pig sort of thing. And it was just a really cool series. I don't know why why us kids were so interested in it, but they were just, the drawings were so cool, the creativity behind it was so cool. I just loved it. And I didn't know they had made a series. Obviously, if they didn't air it in North America, I never would have known that. So I did eventually discover they made a cartoon and searched it out, and here we go. And then they also have like before and after the episodes and stuff, they'll have like Garbage Pail Groaners, where they tell like a real bad dad joke sort of thing. One where they will kind of relate a certain fact, and then other ones where it's just goofy situations, little short skits and stuff like that in between the episodes. Sometimes the episodes are kind of two-parters where there's a couple short stories. So it's kind of all over the board. In terms of the series, I was happy to watch it because there's not a lot of Garbage Pail Kids stuff out there, right? So this was just something extra that I could experience with regards to that line. But in terms of the actual cartoon itself, it didn't blow me away. I'm glad I watched it, but you know, it pales in comparison to most of the other cartoons that I've collected and that I've watched over my life. So it is what it is, but regardless, I'm glad I found it and watched it because, you know, nostalgia factor for me is pretty huge. I live in the past quite a bit in my life. So to watch something like that to me is kind of a big deal, whether it's really good or really bad sort of thing. So anyways, before I keep rambling on and on, we're going to end it here. Those are the 5 things I did over the last few weeks or whatever it's been. And I'm already working on what's coming next. So stay tuned. And can you guess which sport my next jersey is going to be from? Put your guess in the comments, if anybody even watches this. Bye-bye. Meow.